Meeting to order. Can we call roll, please?
Good evening, everyone. Chairman Baugh,
Here.
Vice Chairman Dibble,
Here.
Commissioner Schrader,
Present.
Commissioner Zarguni,
Present.
Commissioner Miller is absent, Commissioner York,
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Here.
and Commissioner Mandel,
Here.
and Commissioner Salazar Garza. Here. Quorum established.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the public hearing comment portion. Anyone wishing to make any general comments may do so. We will hear each agenda item, and you can speak on that at that time. This is for general comments. Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing none, we will close the public comment portion. Moving on to approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the absence of Commissioner Zarguni?
Commissioner Gonzalez, I'll make a motion that we approve the absence of Commissioner Zarguni.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to approval of minutes. Are there any questions, comments, or do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Commissioner Gonzalez, I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, moving on, Andrew, to item 5 under the calendar.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew Demas for Development Services. Item number 5, also subheading number 2, is the proposed calendar for 2022 for both the Planning Commission and Airport Zoning Commission. Just one note I wanted to bring up is there are 3 meetings listed for November. So as you're looking at the calendar, just as we take into account this year, any holiday interactions. But other than that, we just wanted to make sure and get the Planning Commission and your other hat as Airport Zoning Commission to approve the 2022 calendar, unless you have questions or comments.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for those? Has anybody had a chance to look at the calendar? There's no questions. Do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion we approve the calendar as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. On to the consent public hearing items, A and B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for tonight's consent portion of the agenda, we'll begin with item A, plats, subheading item number 3, Charlotte Estates, a preliminary of 80 acres. Item number 4, Flower Bluff Estates, Block H, Lot 14R, a final of 1.9097 acres. Item number 5, Laguna Vista Shores, Block 8, Lot 1R, replat of .382 acres. Item number 6, King Square Addition, lots 3B1 and 3B2, a replat of 46.04 acres. Item number 7, Westgate Heights, Block 12, Lot 17A, a replat of .28 acres. Item number 8, London Town Subdivision, Unit 4, a final plat of 24.34 acres. And item number 9, Rod Plaza South, Block 1, Lot 1, a final of 1.679 acres. Both the TRC and staff have reviewed the plats and determined they are compliant with both Texas Local Government Code and the Unified Development Code and recommend approval. Moving on to time extensions, item number 10, North Beach Townhomes, a final of .83 acres. Item number 11, London Town Subdivision, Unit 7, a final of 10.86 acres. And item number 12, London Town Subdivision Unit 6, a final of 9.44 acres. All 3 of these are the first request for time extensions. Staff recommends approval. Moving on to item 13, lastly for the consent agenda is a rezoning at or near 7601 Yorktown Boulevard. This is case 1221-01 Gulfway Shopping Center. It is a request from the FR Farm Rural District to the CN1 Neighborhood Commercial District, and staff recommends approval. That concludes tonight's consent agenda, and if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Thank you, sir. Are the time extensions, are they 6 month or 12 months?
Still 6 months, but
6
we are working on a text amendment to change that to a year. We haven't forgotten.
Thank you. Any questions for staff regarding items 3 through 13? Seeing none at this time, I will open the public comment portion, the public hearing for items 3 through 13. Anyone wishing to speak on those items? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion or further discussion.
Commissioner Gonzalez, I'll make a motion that we approve items 3 through 13 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's pass. All right, moving on to the public hearing for items C and D.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commission. Thank you all for taking the time out today to entertain our conversation tonight. I'm here returning from our discussion on October 27th regarding staff recommendations to amend the UDC code. If you recall, we went through a pretty lengthy presentation that was built off a lot of background regarding the Community Enrichment Fund. We're giving you all an abbreviated presentation today, but we do have the slides available if there's any background that you all want to revisit or any concerns that the Commission may have. Again, the purpose of the Community Enrichment Fund is to help develop recreational and open space. Currently, there are two methods that the city utilizes to gain open space. This is through the gifting of land that will be dedicated for park space or the payment of fees for the city to acquire new park space and to make improvements on the park space. Again, if you'll note that the way that this is captured is through fee in lieu of land, or a FELO. It's calculated by a fee of A times V equals M, where A equals the amount of acreage that's owed, or 1 acre per 100 dwelling units, times the value of that land, and that is capped at $62,500, equals the amount of fees that's owed by a developer that's going to develop a unit. And as you see, the graphic that's depicted before you all, we decided to provide you all a 100 dwelling unit example, just to graphically depict what someone would expect to pay if their worst case scenario were developing a 100 dwelling unit in Corpus Christi. All in, there would be expected that someone developing in Corpus Christi would be asked to pay $82,500 in FELO fees. I think it's important that we stop here and discuss the weakness in the current process. As stated before, when a contributed development paid fees to the city, it was tracked by a unique budget line item for that particular development. While this was an attempt to try to maintain good accountability of fees that were coming into the city versus expenditures that were leaving out the city, as the city started experiencing more growth, you started seeing that these unique budget line items actually started increasing. At last count through the Parks and Recreation staff, we had came to a count of over 165 budget line items in the Community Enrichment Fund. Currently, the auditing office is also doing a forensic audit of that fund as well, and at last count, the auditing office has come to discover that there are 190 budget line items. Understanding the significant amount of budget line items in there, I think that we all can agree that it's pretty hard to keep up with, not only for an individual that's trying to properly account for revenues or expenditures that's coming into that fund, but it makes it exceptionally difficult to track where those expenditures are going. This issue has made it notably challenging to assure that expenditures also comply with a 5-mile radius requirement that's included in the UDC for any expenditure. For any expenditure against a FELO fee that's paid into the Community Enrichment Fund. In addition, we came to discover that at either 165 or 190 budget line items, at some point it became so tedious that these line items were no longer created, as unique budget line items for each development coming into the community. That happened about 3 to 5 years ago. So now, as you see new development coming into the city, those funds are actually being collected and being placed in these legacy budget line items, making it even more convoluted to help determine which development contributed to the Community Enrichment Fund and what expenditure is actually legally being levied against that contributing development. Therefore, this convolution has led to a lack of transparency, and it's really caused a lot of concern amongst the governing body, and more importantly, the development community as well, because of this lack of transparency, and it's hard to gain stakeholder buy-in. So as a result of historical issues with the way that we've been accounting for revenue and expenditures that's going against the Community Enrichment Fund, the staff recommends we take action to simplify the 5-mile restriction. This can easily be accomplished by tracking fees via area development zones versus individual developments. Area development zones are adopted by council and recognized by both the city and the development community. As you note by the 5-mile areas that were laid across the zone, it's reasonable to accept that our belief that the zones are in keeping with the 5-mile restriction. Use of the area development zones will also address overlaps, ensure that park fees remain in the region of each contributing development. Most importantly, by using area development zones versus these unique budget line items, we're able to reduce a list of 165 budget line items to, that is growing to only 9 budget line items that the finance department and budgeting can account for. In addition to simplifying the accounting process for the Community Enrichment Funds, or should I say for the FELO, we had also decided that we wanted to promote more transparency in the process. So what we're recommending is that our financial policies be updated to require that the city manager develop an annual Community Enrichment Fund budget, and that budget will be developed by a very deliberate process. It'll be driven by identified improvements in established parkland, priorities that have been listed out by the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and in addition, it will be identified by, it will be driven by concerns that are laid out to us in the community as emerging priorities that need to be quickly addressed. We feel that by requiring that the Community Enrichment Fund budget be developed and accompanied with the city's annual operating budget and capital budget, that allows for more transparency. It allows for there to be more oversight by the executive leadership team of the city. And most importantly, it allows for the public to have more feedback and input into where funds for park development open space is going to be invested in the community. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Chris Anderson, who is a Strategic Planning and Innovation Officer, and he wants to have a conversation with you all regarding the other half of the Community Enrichment Fund.
Evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I apologize that I couldn't join you guys when we talked about this last time in October, but my name is Chris Anderson. I'm the Strategic Planning and Innovation Officer for the city. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about the analysis that we did whenever we were trying to compare where the city of Corpus Christi was compared to other major cities in Texas. So reviewing each of the city's ordinances and their UDCs, this graph was made to kind of show where we fall. We're currently in the 6th position. So looking at all things equally, we looked at a scenario again. ACM Young just spoke about the 100 dwelling unit scenario. So I looked at each of their ordinances and their UDCs to calculate how each of these cities would end up in a 100 dwelling unit scenario. And again, we are in the 6th position of the top 8 cities. The current ordinance requires developers to dedicate 1 acre per 100 dwelling units, as I know you've heard. And what we did was actually, to review the park dedication to make sure that was right-sized, I looked at this best practice in a study that was written by an expert in the field from, he's a Texas A&M Parks professor. And looking at best practices in that study, we determined that the right size for the city of Corpus Christi would actually be 1 acre per 57 dwelling units. The way that's calculated, and I know you guys saw that before, but as a quick refresher, you basically take the city's population, divide that by the current parkland acres to arrive at a person per park acre, and then from there, that person per park acre is divided by the persons per household. So that gets us to that 57. That's why that number is a little strange, but that's the number that we arrived at. Oh, and looking at that chart below, we would want to do this incrementally, so not all at once. We would look at possibly phasing in to get to that 57. So in fiscal year 23, changing it from 1 per 100 to 1 per 86 dwelling units down to 57, which would be realized in fiscal year 25. To see how this would look, applying this recommendation in the 100 home development example, you'd see how this update would affect the land dedication and the fee in lieu of land. So again, at the top you have what Dr. Young showed us earlier, where the fee in lieu of would be at $62,500 if we were at the fair market value cap. We're not looking at changing that fair market value cap. So just so you know, that 1.75 acres below would be using that 62.5 in the event that we don't have fair market value or the land value available. Similar to updating the fee in lieu of land, which would be informed by the change to the land dedication amount, we are also looking at updating the park development fee just in line with a very simple inflation factor. So looking at that second column, the park development fee per dwelling unit would incrementally change along with that simple inflation factor. And to make it a little, I hope that breaking this out makes it a little easier to understand, but as you go across to the right, that would show you the new total for each fiscal year. Okay. So to show how these recommendations would change our position, we go from 6 to number 4. So that brings us to the median and be in the median of those 8 cities. It allows us for the city to, it allows the city to maintain the current level of service, as Dr. Young mentioned, despite the increasing development. That ends my section. I don't know if there would be any questions or if we'll keep them for the end, but.
Thank you. We'll keep them to the end.
Okay,
The presentation's over. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So there's been very in-depth conversations that's been had with the development community, specifically the Coastal Bend Builders Association. There's been conversations that's been had with council, and again, we did have a presentation and conversation with the Planning Commission. And from those months of conversations that have been had with all the different stakeholders in the Community Enrichment Fund process, we had collated a list of the requests for information that each of the stakeholders had for the professional staff. If you allow me opportunity, I'll quickly go through them just to return to those questions that specifically the commission had, and we'll just open up the aperture and show you the concerns that were shared by council and the development community.
Thank you.
So the first question that the Planning Commission asked was RFI number 1. What percentage of developments have dedicated land for park space over the last 10 years? And we had our staff do a deep dive into land dedications and plats over the last 10 years, and the answer is 1%. Well, actually less than 1%. We were only able to find 4 developments that did exercise the land dedication versus paying a fee in lieu of land. Second RFI from the Planning Commission, what percentage of the general fund are other Texas cities dedicating to the Parks and Recreation budget? And as you can see, Corpus Christi again is near the median, where we expend approximately 6.77% of our general fund towards the Parks and Recreation budget and the improvements of open space. And that's really in keeping in line with the other top 8 cities in the city of Texas. But what I think that the key takeaway from this is that Corpus Christi, like other cities across the state of Texas, aren't wholly dependent or aren't even heavily dependent on the general fund to fund open space and improvements in parkland across their communities. We have a community enrichment fund, we have a park development fee, and obviously our peer cities across the state are also utilizing similar financial tools to ensure that improvements are being made to parkland across the community, and more parkland is gained as residential development grows. This is RFI number 3 that came from City Council. They had asked, are medians included in the city's record of park acreage? And the answer to that is yes. As stated before, we have 2,100 acres of parkland that we refer to in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. That does include the park space, and it does include the medians. Another RFI from City Council, how much revenue would be generated if the park development fee was raised from $200 to $250 and the fee in lieu of land was left static? In the bottom line, that would bring our total to about $87,500, which really wouldn't move the needle much on getting us closer to the median for open space fees that are realized across the state of Texas. Another RFI, how has residential development trended in the city over the last 10 years? What we did was actually put together a heat map for reference where blue is cold or very little development is taking place, and where white is hot, or that's where the most intense growth is taking place in the community. So as you can see, as anyone would suspect, there's a lot of development that's going south, specifically in South Corpus Christi and in the Padre Island area. We had received another request from council to take a look at dividing some of the area development zones, some of the larger ones like Southside and Padre Island. This is in keeping with the desire to have park fees invested as close as possible to contributing developments as possible. So this is what it would look like, where we created, instead of just a Southside, it'd be a Southside A and Southside B, and Padre Island would be divided into Mustang Island and Padre Island. So basically we would go from tracking 9 area development zones in the Community Enrichment Fund to 11, which we still believe is a whole lot easier than trying to track 190 budget line items or 165 budget line items. We were asked by council how much parkland, be it federal, state, county, or city, is there within the city limits? And the answer to that is there's 2,100 acres of city-owned parkland and 6,530.6 acres of parkland, be it federal, state, county, or city. During one of our discussions with the development community, was asked how much revenue has the FILO generated for the city, and how much revenue has the park development fee generated for the city. And their answer to that is 3.5 million in fee in lieu of land over the last 10 years, and 2.15 million in fee in lieu of land for, 2.15 million for park development fees over the last 10 years. Question from the development community. To simplify the process, how much would the park development fee have to be if we eradicated the fee in lieu of land and just charged the development community a flat park development fee for dwelling units that are being built across the city? And the answer to that is $450 per dwelling unit. That would generate approximately $564,882, or the equivalent of the 10-year average for community enrichment fees that are collected in the community. In addition, we had included in your packets, even though we're not asking for you all to vote on that, is the Community Enrichment Fund budget. And it's important that we wanted to share that with you, because one of the concerns that's shared by the development community, which I share, is basically there's been a collection of park development fees, community enrichment fees over the last 10 years, and generated approximately $6 million worth of revenue. But the money since that collection has not really been placed into production. So one question was asked was, well, how can we be assured that, if we're going to collect fees, or we're going to revise the UDC, or even increase fees, that these monies are going to be used instead of, placed into a fund balance and just continue to watch that fund balance grow? And the answer to that is, again, the recommendation that we pursue an annual community enrichment fund budget each year that's transparent, that receives input from our community and the development community, and we ensure that those monies, we hold people accountable for ensuring that, that budget is followed and those investments are getting out there into the community. So in closing, our staff recommendations remain the same as we had presented to you all at the last October 27th meeting, where the staff recommends that the UDC be amended to rename the Community Enrichment Fund to the Park Development Fund, and rename the Park Development Fee to the Park Improvement Fee to provide more clarity for the purpose of these funds that are being collected and expended in our city. We recommend that the UDC be amended to dissolve the 5-mile radius requirement and restrict the use of fee in lieu of land funding to city area development zones. And when we say the city area development zones, we'd be on board with the 11 city area development zones where Southside was split in half and Padre Island was split in half of the contributing residential development. We also recommend that the UDC be amended to change land dedication requirements from 1 acre per 100 dwelling units to 1 acre per 57 dwelling units. And we understand that that's a significant increase. So understanding that, as Chris has stated before, this would be a gradual increase where there would be no change in dwelling unit requirements. Land dedication requirements in fiscal year 22. It would be a gradual increase over 23, 24, and 25. We also recommend that we increase the park development fee to remain in keeping with the consumer price index or inflation. We're going to recommend to council that the proposed fiscal year 22 Community Enrichment Fund budget be adopted. We're also going to recommend to council that the budget finance policy be updated to require the city manager to present a proposed Community Enrichment Fund budget along with the operating budget and capital budget annually. We're also recommending that language be removed, allowing for a refund of fees if it's not spent within 7 years. And just to provide clarity on that, we had spoke about it before, but that was actually a request through a discussion that we had with the development community, because currently the UDC reads that a refund of fees that are paid into the fund can be given, but it's given to the owner of the property at the end of the 7-year deadline. So it was explained to the staff that it's sort of misleading because it leads some contributing developers to believe that they would be owed a refund at the end of the 7 years, but it seems like it's a bait and switch where you're like, oh, well, yeah, there's language in there for a refund, but it would go to the home or the person that's purchased the property and is in charge of the property in fiscal year 21. In addition, we have recommendations that the UDC be amended to change the determination of the FILO be the responsibility not of the assistant of development services, assistant city manager of development services, rather it be the responsibility of the assistant city manager of Parks and Recreation. Just a rehash of the actions that have been taken to date, which included over the last 7 months, the assembling of a Community Enrichment Fund work group to dig into the policy and make a determination on what it is and, more importantly, how we can improve the process. We reviewed the UDC and assessed that Community Enrichment Fund policy. We conducted our comparative analysis of other Texas cities across the state. We identified challenges with the current policy and prepared recommendations to improve that policy. We received feedback from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee and the Coastal Bend Builders Association. Admittedly, we've had multiple meetings with the Coastal Bend Builders Association, and it would be unfair of me not to give feedback from the organization. Basically, they are not in agreement with, a fee increase, and they really would like to take a look at us trying to pursue the flat park development fee rate and eradicating the fee in lieu of land. Currently, we have concerns about that because we feel that that's going to be a complicated process that really needs to do more of a deep dive because at last discussion, it put us in a position where if we removed a tool like the fee in lieu of land, then there's no flexibility for contributing developers. You pay a fee, you pay a fee and that's it. Whereas the current UDC reads, there's options. You can dedicate land or you can pay a fee, and it really gives an investor in our community that flexibility to meet their needs of their specific project. In addition, we really need to tighten and sharpen our pencil on if we did move to a flat park development fee, what would that number look like? The city staff is of the belief that, if we're going to move forward with a park development fee, then it should be around $450 or something that's in keeping with, revenues that has been generated over the last 10 years, where, there's some concerns from the Coastal Bend Builders Association that the fee should actually be lesser because of the lack of expenditures against that fund over the last 10 years. So I think that as we get more permanent staff in the Parks and Recreation Department, specifically a Parks and Recreation director and a recreational expert, we can have more conversations on, continuing to improve this process and improve the UDC and bring more recommendations back to the Planning Commission and City Council in the very near future. With that being said, I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Commissioner Dibble.
One of the things I specifically asked you for in the last planning commission meeting was, I felt the analysis was flawed because every city that you compared fee structure with was significantly larger than Corpus Christi. And I think in your list of cities, there's probably no city in there that's less than double the size of the city of Corpus. And so I specifically asked to go look at other cities around the state of Texas that were more comparable in size to the city of Corpus Christi. And I'm just curious why that wasn't done.
Yes, sir. Actually, in this analysis, currently Corpus Christi is the number 6 largest city in the state, and we did an analysis over 8, so at least 2 of the cities are smaller than Corpus Christi.
Which
And-
cities on that list are smaller?
Oh, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. You're correct, sir. All the other cities are larger than the city of Corpus Christi.
Yeah,
You're
and,
correct.
and that's an ongoing frustration is we bring up issues here in the planning commission because you're seeking our feedback, and then they're completely disregarded. And you come back in with basically the same presentation, and you know, the whole reason we're appointed by city council is to bring perspectives that are gonna help us as a city make better decisions. And I just think the analysis is flawed, and now it makes me doubly concerned that when we asked to have specific things addressed, and it just wasn't me, it was other people on this commission, and I'm not sure anything that we asked for got addressed in that presentation. And I don't know if it's just a general disregard for what the planning commission is, or was it just an oversight on all the things that were asked for, but, I mean, I'll just tell you, it doesn't make me feel real good.
Yes, sir. And let me be abundantly clear that it's not a complete disregard for the commission. As stated, the concerns that you all conveyed to us, we took the notes and we captured them in the RFIs. In fact, the first 3 RFIs were planning commission specific. That was an oversight about the smaller cities, and that's definitely something that we can work on. And the reason is one of the practices that the professional staff is maintaining, not only in the Community Enrichment Fund, but across policies throughout the administration is, hey, well, what are the cities above us doing? Because, you know, they've been there, they've done that, and it allows for us to identify best practices to help us continue our improvement. So it's not a disregard on our part. Is more so that it was just we've been following. It's been exercising muscle movement on the way that we look at other policies across the administration.
And I'm okay with looking at bigger cities, but I also think we need to have a reality check because we're not Houston and we're not City of San Antonio and we're not a major metropolitan market relative to these other cities that are in the comparison. And so it just, you know, part of me wanting to get cities that were closer to Corpus's size and smaller is because I think there's a better gauge here. And I think it's a more complete analysis to see both sides of the perspective, both bigger and larger. And in this case, we got ignored, or I got ignored again.
Well, sir, I would question that though, because as we stated in the October 27 meeting, a study on that has already been conducted, the Chrome study that Chris was referencing earlier, which is the Blue Book standard for fee development for open space across the state of Texas. And one of the first statements out the book is there is no rhyme or reason, you know, on how park development fees or field fees are recouped in cities. Someone like Houston may take a fee load but don't have a park development fee. Someone like El Paso may take both. You know, some just may charge a flat rate. Basically, we tried to do some type of analysis on identifying trends. We tried to associate that trend with population size. It didn't work. We tried to associate that trend with amount of acreage. That didn't work. There's just no set way for the way cities are conducting business to pursue community enrichment fees. So understanding that fact, the staff came to you all with a recommendation. What we feel is what's the best fit for Corpus Christi and for our community. And that's how we put together this presentation.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
One of the other things we talked about last time was how to be a little more dynamic with this. And as far as setting the fees, the one thing that I do agree with you on is keeping the land dedication component as an option. I do think that's an important dynamic. For example, these developments that are going in, say along the Oso Creek or something like that, where you've got land that is not appropriate due to flood reasons for residential lots, that could make, in a particular given scenario, be very good for park dedication. And it does take more money these days to develop parks and pretty much everything else. So if a developer is now thinking in a way that better utilizes the land that they have, they can bring the price point down on the homes. They can't. So those kind of things are important. Where I think it becomes more challenging in the analysis you've done, and I think speaks to Commissioner Dibble's point of frustration some, is that the comparison to cities is, I mean, really all it did for me was said, okay, we're somewhere in the middle and we're not way at the bottom, we're not way at the top. Fine. We understand we're in the brackets. Beyond that, I didn't feel it really lent much to me. And as for example, Houston's really low on this. If you go to Houston, what they've been doing for the last 20 years is, because there's so much pressure on the flood problem that they've got, that the development in parkland that they're doing are all of these flood zones. They're fantastic parks. I don't know how they're recorded in this. It doesn't matter, but it's being dynamic about how we look at this and doing it in a way that benefits people. Because if we're just simply dedicating a chunk of a couple of lots over here for a park, doesn't get used, doesn't get improved, it's not a benefit to the community. But if it is done in a dynamic way, we eventually develop a linear park along the Oso, or we have these things that get developed. And so I very strongly encourage you let's don't get so much in the weeds on exactly how much other cities are spending and how they're doing it, but let's figure out the best way to challenge developers to do and give them the opportunities to be creative and develop neighborhoods and communities that are really desirable. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner York.
Thank you. So I also asked a question last time, and I will give you credit, at least got a partial answer. My question was, how are these other cities, spending money on parks? Our park fees, we were 6 out of 8 or something, and our parks are not 6 out of 8. And so my question was a bigger question, and I'll give you credit. There was the slide in here about the other cities and their percentage of the general fund that goes to parks, so I appreciate that. But I think we're still missing the answer on the bigger pictures. Why are all these cities' parks so much better than ours? If we're 6th out of the top cities, in fees, our parks should reflect that, but they don't. So I would still like to see, as you put, a deep dive into that. What are other cities doing? One of the things I mentioned earlier, are they doing public-private partnerships, or their HOAs just spending more money than ours are? What is it? Because it would be nice to know. Because essentially what staff's asking for is, kind of like a tax increase. So, hey, we can't afford to keep our parks up. We need more money. And could that money come from other places, or do we just have to increase the fees? And that's the question that makes it difficult for me to want to move forward with this. And then on top of that, we have this audit going on. And you mentioned that the development community, said these fees should actually be lowered because that money wasn't spent. And I understand that, and if I was in their position, I may say the same thing. And I don't think it's that the money they didn't want to spend it, but for some reason it didn't get spent. And so does that contribute to this problem? If we had spent all that money, then could we have maintained our parks without a fee increase? I think those are all questions that deserve to be answered before we move forward. Sorry for using this, I guess, as more of a comment than a question, period. But I do think it's important to finish this audit and then, determine where the problems were, where the money went, why it wasn't spent, and then see if that would have changed things, and does that change how much you think the fees need to be increased, and then maybe revisit that, before we move forward with any of these changes.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Okay, so this, has there been a master plan developed for these parks that you're going to start doing? And has there ever been one? Because like Commissioner York was saying, these parks, I don't know how long it's been that they've been not addressed. And so right now we've got a lot of parks that are just not in the condition they should be for the residential area. So I'm just wondering if there was ever a master plan developed then that they're supposed to be already fixing up some of these other parks that should have been done, which will trickle an effect on what we're trying to charge the developers.
Yes, ma'am. Currently, we're working on the 2021 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We anticipate that that's going to be complete, if not at the end of this year, in the beginning of January. That's been in the works for slightly over a year and a half. There was a previous plan, which was the Parks and Recreation Master Plan 2012. And if I could be frank, the reason why, funds were expended and why our parks don't look as good as other cities is because we didn't have that competent staff that was following that strategy. And it's because of that fact why there is new leadership in the Parks and Recreation Department. In fact, we're still looking for a new Parks and Recreation director that can take a strategy and take a department to meet that strategy. There's a reason why there's a new ACM over the Parks and Recreation Department. You can have all the strategies that you want, but you don't have that leadership that's actually going to implement, then that's how you end up with 6 parks along Ocean Drive that are not furnished, or a swing set and a barbecue pit here, but no standardized format on what furnishes is going to look, in other parts of the city. So we definitely understand, and there was a concern that was conveyed to us by the development community that, hey, well, let's wait till the audit, comes out, to make a determination on which direction we should take. But the reality is the audit isn't looking for malfeasance or looking for, wrongdoing. It's just trying to make a good determination, accountability on, hey, how much funds were received or since the inception of this fund, and how much of the funding was spent, where was it spent? But what does that do for our parks today? Nothing. What is it, while waiting for the audit to be completed, how does that resource, our current infrastructure? It doesn't. It's the staff's belief that, hey, well, the money's here. Let's put it into production. Let's get it into that investment in the community, and we're going to figure out our way moving forward and allow the auditing office to figure out, what happened in the past.
And I do concur that the audit's going to tell you where we misspent the money, if it was spent elsewhere out of the district or not. So I agree that I don't think the audit's going to help shape how the fee looks, but I do think that we talked about several items tonight about, a lump sum per dwelling that might be more beneficial or not. So I think there's still some items that it sounds like, and we'll open the public comment and we'll obviously take motions, but that there's still little options that we need to discuss with the stakeholders and get some more buy-in before this sounds like it moves all the way forward, just from what I'm hearing. But I agree, I don't think the audit's going to give us that information. I think the audit's going to say, hey, you spent more money over here and you shouldn't have, but this is going to fix that already. I mean, I do like the idea of the 11 zones and then easier to track that money. So that's great. I like that part of this. So just for my part, Commissioner Dibble.
You talked about the audit not looking at malfeasance. It's my understanding part of that audit was going to see if funds that were pulled out to fund the Cole Park renovations, as well as improvements at West Haven Park, were done contrary to the operating parameters of this fund because it was expended outside the 5-mile radius, and that the results of that are going to come back February 8th. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure if that's a part of the scope. I'm sure it is, because that's conversations that have been had with the auditing office, so I'm sure that is a part of the scope of the audit. But would I call that malfeasance or no? When I was saying malfeasance, I mean money's misappropriated, stolen, or some type of illegal act, should I say?
Well, I mean, I guess everyone's got different different definition of misappropriation, but if you're supposed to spend funds in a 5-mile radius and you pull out over $1 million to fund those parks, you know, call it what you want, but I certainly want to know what the answer is on the result of the audit.
Yes, sir. And one thing to state, though, like for example, Cole Park, and we had this conversation before, not with the commission, but one concern, again, it is monies that's expended in the regional parks is a legitimate expense. In accordance with UDC, it states that you can spend money within 5 miles of a park that is most likely to be used by the residents of a development or a regional park. And that's just more evidence to my point that I had in the previous presentation with you all on October 27th is everybody gets wrapped around this 5-mile circle. And because of that fact, we end up with, you know, a lot of convolution, a lot of ambiguity. We had the development community not sure, okay, do I have to spend this or do I have to spend this? And then you have the Parks and Recreation staff saying, hey, can I spend here or can I not spend here? So we're trying to get rid of all this ambiguity and all this convolution, get rid of this wraparound regarding the 5-mile radius, and try to put something in place that makes sense, that ensures that there's a shared understanding with both the professional staff, the governing body, and the development community going forward into Community Enrichment Fund.
Commissioner Schrader.
Well, as we talked about last time, and you've reiterated that here today, and I think all of us agreed with that is that, you know, these doing away with all these line items is absolutely necessary because it was obfuscating whatever was done. The zones you're creating, I think, is a good way to do it, and the information that was included in the packet that shows the expenditures over the past couple of years and going forward, that's being evenly distributed into the council districts, and you've got to focus each year on one district to make larger improvements that year, and then next year it shifts to all of that. I think looks very and it's easy to see. It's so, again, like we said before, appreciate that I think everybody agrees that kind of anybody in the general population can look at those kinds of areas and see that that's an appropriate way to spend money as far as equality of distribution. And I agree that as we talked about before, the 5-mile radius thing does not help what you all are trying to do, does not give you the flexibility to focus on regional parks, doesn't give you the flexibility to have feature projects as much. And that gets back to the point I made before, is cities are dynamic, and we deal with the geography that we're given. And so the idea of, you know, the point I made before about, you know, Houston doesn't look like it spends much money on parks, probably because they do incredible park developments with flood control money that they get from the federal government. And it just so happens that you can't do a lot with that. You can't build structure, so you can develop parks. I don't know if that's appropriate to us. Could be in some of the areas, but they had to get into that way of thinking because they have a serious problem they've got to deal with. And by the same time, what are the issues that we deal with? So I do believe we have to look at this more dynamically.
Yes, sir.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. Thank you for the presentation. I'm sure we'll have more questions shortly.
Yes, sir.
Anyone wishing to speak on item 14? Please state your name and address for the commission.
You're a lot taller than me, Demon. Hi, I'm Wendy Herman. I'm the executive officer of the Coastal Bend Home Builders Association, 5325 Yorktown Boulevard. I kind of feel sorry for these guys that got up here. They have been trying to redecorate an ugly room, and by trying to fix a piece of the UDC that really should be scrapped and started over again. We have been in negotiations, as Neiman said, with them about this particular thing. And earlier today, I sent all of you guys an email, and I don't know if you had an opportunity to take a look at it, but I just want to paraphrase a little bit of that. We agree with so much of what they have changed on this. We agree with the 11 districts, how it's being spent. We agree that the city should be responsible for building parks and not the developers. There were so many of the things that we agreed on. The thing that we that we thought that should be done is that we should scrap the thing and go for a flat fee. And the sticking point became where the flat fee, or how much the flat fee should be. Our number was $325 a lot, a single per lot fee. And the reason that it was based on that, as I explained to you guys a little earlier in your email, is that Neiman's 450 comes from, when you take a look at what happened historically over the last decade, we usually do about 1,000 houses a year. Well, with D.R. Horton coming into town and other national builders, we have jumped up. According to Development Services, we have done over 1,500 at the 1st of November. Single-family permits were pulled. So you kind of get the same number whenever you're adding 50% more houses. We have more national builders that are coming in, so I don't think that we're ever going to go back to 1,000 houses a year. So I think it's just going to grow exponentially, which means that the funds would actually grow exponentially too. So my request to you guys is that we table this until perhaps we could have an opportunity to go back to the table and negotiate, because we are so close together. $325 per house and $450 per house is not a very far gap, and there's so much of this that we have agreed on. So I really think that we can get there. Neiman and his staff, they have all been great about working with us, answering phone calls, answering questions, and I really think that we can get there. Plus, I think it would be very interesting to see what happens with this audit, and to see, we have a lot of questions. But our question, our 325 is not based on, because you guys spent our money badly last time. That was not the reason. The reason is based on what the actual building is currently going on here in the city. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Commissioner York has a question for you real quick. Commissioner York.
If I can answer it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but
No, that's okay.
since you represent the home builders and the development community, as far as you know, did they have any opinions about the 5-mile radius versus the zones versus just saying the most likely part to serve
Yes,
your
on the
community?
original one, and correct me if I'm wrong, Neiman, originally y'all had 9 zones, right? And then they were going to divide, and so that was one of the things that we liked as well, that they were dividing the south side in half, and they were also dividing the island in half, specifically because those are the 2 most active areas of building, and so we kind of felt like that they should be able to keep a little bit more of their funds. I mean, obviously, these funds have not been spent the way the UDC originally wanted them to be spent. If they did, Bill Witt Park would look like Disneyland. So, I think that that's worthy of a review. I'm waiting to see what that audit says.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Item 14. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Additional comments or questions or?
I do have a question.
All right, Commissioner Zarguni.
When is this audit supposed to be finished? Is there?
Do we have a date for the audit?
Do we have a date for the audit?
No, we don't have a date currently for the audit, and I expect that it's going to be, some time. Again, when I said that they're doing accounting of the fund, it's not just an accounting of the fund. We're talking, the Community Enrichment Fund has been in place, Chris, since 2003, 2000. So 14, since 2003, they're going to have to do 18 years of not just accounting, but a forensic audit. So I'm not anticipating that if they are going to do something that's thorough and complete, that it's going to be completed within 3 months. And that goes back to my thought process. We understand that audits being done to concern themselves what happened back in 2003 until 2020, but with the staff and what we've been doing here with our engagements with the Coastal Bend Builders Association, our engagements with the Planning Commission and Council is, okay, got it. We understand that, we're looking into, mistakes of the past, but we're trying to be forward-leaning, and we're trying to, be that driver on, okay, there's new leadership in town. We have a new strategy that's coming in December or in January. Let's get our investment, let's invest in this new strategy and go ahead and get our community in the shape that it's supposed to be in 10, 15 years ago. So we're trying to be forward-facing versus backwards-facing.
Thank you. Yes, sir, you can make the comment.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. The land dedication amount has not been revised since 2013, and the fee, the park development fee, hasn't been looked at since 2007. That fee is actually able to be looked at and reviewed by council every 2 years. So,
Thank you for that. Commissioner Dibble.
It was my understanding in talking to Gil Hernandez, who's, I guess, chairman of the audit committee for Corpus or on the audit committee, that there actually was a date certain on when that audit was due back, and I believe it was February 8th. So I don't know if that's been communicated. That was information that I got, that there actually is a definitive timeline on when that audit's due back in.
Understand that.
Thank you. Commissioner Salazar Garza. Oh, did you pull yours?
That was my same question.
That there was a time frame?
Yeah, February 8th.
Awesome. Any other questions, or Commissioner York, did you have a comment?
Well, it seems like there's a lot of talk about tabling, so it would be nice to get a confirmation. Do we have a date if the audit's going to be involved, if somebody's going to make a motion to table? I know we like hard dates, so that would be nice to know, but the comment I want to make, because I do support tabling this, not so much just because of the audit, but it sounds like there's more discussions to be had to figure out what's the best way to do this, if it's a fee, and what number would that fee be. And I would like to see, we mentioned money that wasn't spent. Does that factor into the amount that staff is looking at, or very least just, to go back and have some more discussions on what's the most appropriate fee? Maybe look at, as was mentioned, the uptick in homes that are being built now, and what the, what it looks like is going to happen in the future. And then also, I really think that just looking at the way that the fees are going to be allotted, I know we went from 5 Mile to the zones, and I think the zones are better, but would it be better just to go, what the intent seems to be, which is the most, I forget the term, but the park that people are most likely to use? Because as was mentioned, Billwitt Park, most of the development has been in the south side, and Billwitt Park's awful. I mean, I played sports out there when I was younger, and it looks the same now. Parking lots haven't been done, I don't think, in 20 years. But with all the development there, you think the money would be spent there. So are the zones really going to fix that? Because even Southside A and B, that could go to a bunch of other parks. So I think it would be nice to at least look at that language and figure out, maybe you keep the zones, but some kind of language to help make sure we're actually going to spend the money where it's intended to be spent, and not just look at these zones and say, well, we could spend it over here because it's in the zone. So I would like to see that, and then also see some more communication on what would be the most appropriate way to do it and what that fee amount might be.
Thank you for that. Mr. Buck.
Yes, if the Plan Commission is interested in this item being tabled, I would have a recommendation that that the commission simply recommend to the city council that the council table that. That way, we can move this item forward to council, and the recommendation of the Plan Commission could be that council table it, and then that discussion could be there to prevent this from being further delayed to council.
And I think the only comment we'd have with that are we're recommending it as presented to be tabled. And so all the corrections would go straight to council, not back to here. Is that correct?
Or you can also make a recommendation to council that it be tabled and corrections returned to the Planning Commission for review. I mean.
Okay, options there.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Just some thoughts. All right, do I have a motion considering this item?
Just a clarification, you're saying if we table it, it doesn't come back here, it just goes to council?
No, if you table it, if we approve it with the motion that council tables it, is how we would.
So your recommendation to council is to table it.
If we table it, comes back here. If we approve with recommend.
To table.
Okay,
it would
I'm
go.
with you.
Well, let me ask you, what's the difference, so we recommend to table, council could say, we don't care what planning commission thinks, we're gonna move forward with it anyway, that's their option, correct?
They can always do that. That's always an
Okay.
option.
And so if we recommend to table it as a planning commission,
It comes back here.
then it would require, if the council wanted to override it, I guess any decision would require a supermajority of the council, is that correct, if they want to go against planning commission?
I will have to review the code to see if the 3/4 applies to text amendments, because I believe it only applies to zoning amendments, but I can look at that.
Okay.
I was confirming, yeah, that's correct.
It's correct that it needs a supermajority, or that it
No,
only
doesn't.
applies to
Only
zoning?
applies to zoning.
So no, they don't have to have a supermajority. Okay, further discussion or?
I just have a comment to make.
Yes, sir.
When I spoke to Councilman Hernandez, he mentioned that yesterday the audit date was announced on February 8th. So I do want to bring that up because he
correct.
did mention it to me.
happy to make a motion on the item if you want it.
Please, we're looking for a motion or further discussion.
I'll make a motion that the planning commission tables this item until, I don't know when the next available meeting, but, maybe the first scheduled planning commission meeting in March. That way it'll get us time to get the audit complete, get it reviewed, and act on it from there.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to item 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So item 15, to keep moving along, is zoning case 1021-05. It is Dr. Raj. It is a property located at 4716 Ocean Drive. This case was previously presented to the Planning Commission of a request from the RS10 district to originally the RMAT district. Since then, the applicant has chosen to amend their application to the RM1 multifamily district. So just as a quick refresher, here's an aerial overview of the subject property. It is located adjacent to the Alexa property, and to the east is a vacant lot along with single-family homes. As you can see, the zoning pattern, the RMAT district has existed quite a bit since the adoption of zoning in the city of Corpus Christi, along with the adjacent single-family zoning. As you can see, these are the requirements on the right-hand side of the screen as stated in the UDC regarding setbacks, parking, landscaping, etc. As far as land use is concerned, the property is designated medium-density residential currently, and the future land use is to show it as also medium-density residential, which is between 4 and 13 dwelling units per acre. As far as utilities are concerned, all utilities are available to the subject property. Of the 8 notices mailed out, 7 were returned in opposition, which roughly constitutes 39.3%. 0 were returned in favor. Now, staff has taken a look at, of course, the tabling from the last Planning Commission hearing, which did set the bar quite high as far as density at the RMAT district, which is 60 units per acre. And we do agree that the RM1 district is a little more appropriate. So as you'll know, RMAT, again, 60 units per acre. That's the Alexa next door, multi-story structure, 4 or 5 stories in height, which is immediately going to drop currently to a single-family residence and continue on. The RM1 district will provide a transitional zone between the 2 zoning districts. So instead of just a drop from RMAT to RS10, you will have a transition from RMAT to RM1 to RS10. That RM1 district has a maximum of 22 units per acre. Now, before anyone thinks that that means 22 apartments will be built, that's not quite the case. The property is 0.72 acres in size, which would roughly give you 15 units as far as just pure math. Now, aside from that, you still have to account for buffer yards, setback, in this case, 33 parking spaces if they were to build 15 units. All of those items start to chip away at the number of eligible units that can be built. So yes, you may be eligible to build 15 units, but if you can't fit 33 parking spaces, then guess what? You can't build 15 units. That has to be shrunk further. Looking at the size of the property again, and based on the requirements, I would, fair to say, at most it could be 10 units would be probably the maximum amount. Still meet buffer yards, height restrictions, and every other requirement that the UDC will set forth. So with that, just to give you an idea of what RM1 would look like, and of course, that concludes my presentation. I'd be more than happy to address any questions the Commission may have.
Thank you. Commissioner York.
So you kind of started to answer already, but you think that 10 units could actually fit here, but how many parking spaces? That 20-something?
Yes.
Can you even fit 20 parking spaces on that lot by
That's
itself?
the catch. Without a site plan, because we haven't gotten that far in the discussion.
Right, but I mean, it's a little bit larger than a, typical south side lot, but it's still, I don't see fitting 20 spaces on there. But where I was going with this is this even feasible to develop this as a multifamily property?
Well, the idea, again, is to provide transition. So in speaking with the applicant, their idea is to have a few extra units and to also live on site. So this is not just an income-generating property where they will, build their apartments and walk away. They're going to be living on site. They just wanted to have options to add a few extra units. They have not committed to any number, but I would even be highly suspect that it would even grow if you could fit 10 units, that they would wish to build that much. They are in attendance, and I'm sure they will speak during the public comment phase. The idea was to try to find a compromise. Obviously, the neighborhood has concerns about apartments, and 60 units was quite high at our original idea. So to come down to the lowest possible multifamily district, just to give the applicant an option of redevelopment, we thought RM1 would be the most appropriate. There is no district lower that is multifamily.
Understood. And appreciate that. Understand you're trying to do a transitional zoning, and I think you've done the best you could from a zoning district standpoint, but I don't know how well that translates to reality of what's going on here, but I know that's not for you, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
From the comments, a lot of the comments were made last time. The concern, I think, is one related to the height. What is the height of the Alexa?
The height of the Alexa is just below, it's in the 50s, essentially, 50 feet in height, more or less, to about the roof plate. Then, of course, it has multi-story parking along with that, so it's quite imposing. The reason that normally when we have these situations, and what I was explaining to the applicant, is our code says whenever you're adjacent to a single-family residence, for every foot you go above 12 feet in height, you must be 2 feet off of a property line. Now, in this case, because these two lots are vacant, the Alexa was limited to just a 30-foot setback cap. Now, if a single-family home had existed on this lot, that would have been much greater. But it was just the fact that because a home had not yet been built, I could not impose a greater setback by code than 30 feet, which is what the Alexa was constructed to.
Right. So, and if, as it's currently zoned RS10, what is the height limitation?
Height limitation for RS10 is 35 feet for a single-family home, 3 stories, more or less.
Okay, so was, at the RM1, was there a discussion of making, because the RM1 is 45.
Correct.
So was there any discussion about taking the RM1 and making it a special permit, I guess, so to speak, is the way you do that, to go to 35, and then effectively it's the same thing as an RS10 in as far as the massing?
In full transparency, one of the ideas that we had as staff was perhaps the 2-family district, the RSTF, with a special permit to allow them, let's say, up to 8 units, and then put a height restriction that is a little more significant. So, or essentially impose the 2-to-1 ratio as if they were building to maximum height. Mm-hmm. So either you set a hard number, or you say, no matter the height, you have to meet the 2-to-1 setback, regardless if a house is ever built next door. If they were to build at 45 feet today, that would be a 66-foot setback, which if a property is only 150 feet, that does not leave a lot of room to build on.
Right.
But that is another option we just had as internal discussion.
Okay.
Ultimately, the applicant chose the RM1 route, which we do support, but there was a back and forth discussion on what options were available.
So it's essentially, it's what you're saying is that's already built in as self-regulating if it's approved.
In essence, yes.
Okay. Thank
Commissioner
you.
York.
One of the questions that came up last time was about the park, which I see we have a handout about. So there apparently, it came up that there wasn't ever a plan for a park to be there, but it looks like there actually was in one of these old city, the Southeast Area Development Plan. How does that, was that factored into staff's recommendation this time around, and if so, how?
We did take a look at the area development plan. Side note, it was last updated in 1995, so I was in 5th grade when that was adopted. It is currently in process of being updated as the Midtown Area Development Plan. of the drafts that I've seen and discussions I've had with the planning department, that line has not carried over as far as future park dedications. As we've just heard in the previous presentation, it's more in the line of collecting fees rather than adding additional parks, especially niche parks. I can tell you firsthand, when I helped out with the 2012 Parks Master Plan, it's to move away from the neighborhood niche level because it's a maintenance issue. You're stuck with a park less than an acre in size. It costs you more to send a mowing crew to upkeep than you would ever gain in value. So that's just the reality of the situation is, yes, I'm all for parks. I'm a big parks fan. I'm a big sidewalks fan, as many waivers as we present to the commission. But the hard facts are, the long run, once you dedicate a park, you have to maintain it. And that is the issue.
I understand that. I just, in here, it wasn't really about having a neighborhood park, because I know, working on developments, the city's not even taking land, so it was funny when that last item, leave the dedication option in there, but it's hard to dedicate when the city says we don't want it. But it's different in this because it was specifically called out as to maintain a view corridor, which I think is nice. I used to drive that, turn left on Ocean Drive every day coming to work, and you get to see the bay, and that would provide the best buffer between the multifamily and the residential. Obviously, it's sold now, but I mean, it still seems like that the intent of that would still stand, and it
Sure.
might be good to translate that to the next development plan.
A couple of folks across the street, townhomes, will have a great view, and the folks waiting at the red light at Airline will have a great view, and as traffic moves, you'll get a snapshot of 100 feet you've driven at. I wish people would follow the speed limit, but at 45 miles an hour, I'm not sure how much of a view you gain in 100 feet, but that's, again, it's just the reality.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff before I open the public? Go ahead, Commissioner Zucchini.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer that, or I should ask the applicant. What was I know we talked about it last time, but what was their main reason of zoning change on this one? Something about bringing their value up because they couldn't. There was a reason they mentioned last time as they
Development options.
Development
So
options.
like anything else, this property, and again, in full disclosure, originally had plans for a single-family residence. And I think the construction of the Alexa caused them to pause and reconsider whether or not a single family would be the only use that they would prefer. So to open up development possibilities of adding a few extra units along with, again, living on site was the idea behind rezoning the property. It wasn't simply just to change value or to have agreements with adjacent property owners if sales were to occur. It was purely, how can we make this site the best, not only for the applicant, but if there were to be other development options coming into play, they would already be set by the zoning.
And I understand that. And my question is that knowing that the size of the property is very small, right? And at the time that the current applicant purchased the property, knowing that this property was zoned residential, the adjacent property Alexa was multifamily from the beginning, right? Not knowing exactly how many units we are able to get based on the information you provided it, I think it creates a kind of an uncertainty giving this kind of a zoning that I think is, in my opinion, unfair to the neighbor to the right and create this kind of a uncertainty of it is what I'm trying to say. Not knowing exactly how many units we can get, to Commissioner York's point. We don't even know how many units and parking, because how big is this lot? Less than half an acre, I'm assuming?
It's 0.72 acres, so the maximum at RM1 that could be built is 22 units. Now, that is the cap. Now, when you factor in parking and landscaping buffer yards, height setbacks, that number can only go down. You can never go above 15 units.
And there hasn't been any kind of a drawing or site plan that the applicant has tried to provide you guys to kind of see what they can realistically do?
At this stage, in fact, we just had this discussion yesterday at council. You have to be very careful as far as how far you go into design and architecture. It's not like a special permit or a PUD where it's set in stone. The idea today is to look at purely land use. Would a minimum lowest level apartment zoning, multifamily zoning, be appropriate for this spot? Regardless if they build the biggest lighthouse, pink tower, what have you, it's whether or not the land use is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask that the applicant come and speak first, please. All right, just your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chairman. And also, I thank Andrew for making a case for us. And I'm going to answer a couple of questions Council Planning Commission member asked. So the original intent, was to build the single-family home. When we bought this property, there was no apartment. There was no Alexa. There was no Alexa.
And just to clarify, just one at a time, please. It'd be, you could definitely have next slide.
So there was no Alexa, and it was all vacant land. Then when we went and asked the person who owned the land was the person had the apartment complex next opposite to our land, and he said that we are not going to build anything. Don't worry about it. So we are fine. So that's kind of assurance we got that nothing will be built next to us and it's going to be vacant land. They said we have this land mainly because of the apartment complex. We want to have a view of the ocean, so we're not going to build anything. So we kind of got that information, so we thought, okay, nothing is going to come. It's going to be vacant land. Let's build a house. So we actually had the permit and we were about to dig the land. At that time, something happened and then we kind of delaying. Then Alexa started coming. Then we thought, I don't know what is going to happen. So people discouraged us from building the house. So we kind of stuck with that at that time. Because that owner who was there at the opposite complex, he kind of sold this property and I think he is deceased now. So after that, we still thought that let's go and build it. It's fine. Apartment complex is okay. We can build we can re-plan our house to a smaller size and build. But the problem with Ocean Drive is that the cost of the building the house not necessarily is the value of the house. So you end up spending a lot more than the what house will cost. So because we are still in middle class and higher middle class, you can call it, we still have to buy a loan from the bank. And if something happens, to get out is not easy to sell the house at that higher price. So what we were thinking is that, like you said, how many plans? So we already spent enough money on that lot because we had the architecture, we had all the planning, we had the appropriate how much basement, foundation we had to do, everything. So we spent quite a bit of money. And so after now, without this zoning change, if you want to have a plan and architecture and thing like it costs money. I didn't want to spend more money without having this zone change. So our vague plan is that maybe build 4 units maybe. So where maybe 3 floors. Bottom will be the parking for maybe 4 or 5 families, including us. Then maybe we will live in the first floor or the second floor, depending on in the one floor, whatever units built, 2 or 3 units. So probably it's not going to be more than 4 or 5 units. That's what we're thinking. And that too depends on what we can get from our architecture and how much loan we can generate. So what this is going to help us is that instead of building like a $2 million, $3 million house, for the same investment, maybe we can build 3 or 4 units where the other 2 or 3 units may subsidize our the property value. And also we may end up basically selling that houses at cost even, or maybe even below the cost. At least it will bring us our burden down a little bit. That's what we were thinking. Having said that, these are all like assumptions. I'm not sure how much we can execute. So we just wanted to have the option. And if these options doesn't work out, when we go to explore this option to see whether we can build 3 or 4 houses, if the banks say or if the people discourage, we may end up just building a small house just to make the best use of the property instead of letting it waste, So then other thing is that I think the parking will not be a problem, like you were asking how many parking we can build. I think because we are only 3 or 4, maybe maximum 5 units, probably 4. I don't think we can build more than 4 units there, including one where we can live. So parking will be enough. So then what else I was going to say? Yeah. Then the concerns about our neighbors, so people are saying that maybe traffic will increase if you build a multi-complex unit there. So because, like I said, the number of units will be so small, I don't think it will add practically any congestion for the traffic. Then the view is not going to be any different than whether it's single-family house or units we are planning to build there is going to do the same thing. It's not going to obstruct anything. Then actually, like Andrew suggested a good point that this will be a good transition from a huge multi-complex corporate building to single owner 3-4 units. So we are not going to really spoil their beauty or whatever aesthetics of that location, or we're not going to do anything which is kind of look ugly to the neighbors are not going to cause any trouble to anybody. So our request will be to please allow us to have the option. Then if this goes through, then we can pursue further, maybe talk to the builders, architects, and maybe bank, and then we can go, plan depending on how it goes.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Commissioner Medina.
Have you thought about the size of the total development? Like, you said no more than 4 units, including yours.
Yeah.
Are these going to be like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom?
No, it has to be at least 2-3 bedroom minimum, because I'm not going to build like an apartment. It has to be at least 3 bedroom,
3 bedroom?
at least.
We're not going to be like, it's not going to be a rental property. It's kind of probably we're going to sell it to someone so they can,
Yeah, it's not going to
it's
be
not
rental.
going to be a rental property.
It's not going to be
gonna
investment property. It's going to be houses.
Yeah,
where-
it's, so we are going to live in there as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other
I have
comments?
a question.
Yes, sir.
You said it's not gonna be for rental property?
That's correct.
Yes.
So how are you gonna be able to sell the apartment?
That's what we have to
individually?
plan. So we have some friends who want to kind of stay or live there in Ocean Drive. Maybe we can do a partnership with them, and maybe sell the units in advance to budget it, or even get a loan. So depending on whether, that's what I'm not sure. It's all like assumptions. So there are some people interested. They want to.
I understand, but my question is, how are you allowed to sell the units individually if it's an apartment complex? Because it needs to sell as a whole. But you're saying you're selling them separately.
But I don't think it's an apartment. I think it's just multifamily.
Multifamily, yeah.
That's
It's not
what I-
apartment, yeah. No,
okay.
it's
Yeah,
not
it's not
apartment.
an apartment.
It's a multifamily home, like build 4 houses. One house will be bigger for us to live, then maybe another floor where we can build 2 or 3 houses, depending on the interest of the people.
So forgive me, but I'm kind of confused, but you're asking for an RM1 zoning. RM1 zoning is for multifamily, but if I'm
Yes.
understanding correctly, you're talking about single family or building.
No, it's a yeah, okay, sorry, yeah.
Andrew, thank you.
The question we're trying to get to is it's condos. So you'll have one building, multiple units. You can sell the area between, what we call the area between the studs. You can sell the air inside of the walls of a condo in multifamily zoning.
Okay.
So it's a traditional condominium.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, so, I mean, you like you
Sorry.
said, you're amateurs, so I don't know the details, so.
Commissioners, are good? Anything else?
No, I'm good, thank
All right. And did I miss one? Anybody good? All right. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you so
very much. All right. Anybody else wishing to speak on this item, please approach and state your name and address for the record.
David Loeb, 4771 Ocean Drive. I don't live on Ocean Drive proper. I live on the Ocean Drive side street, kind of near the end. I'm the last person to build a house in this neighborhood. We moved in last December. I did not even consider that lot when we were looking for a lot to build on. I'm a fourth generation real estate investor here. I drive by that lot 6 times a day. It's an unbuildable lot. It should be a park. That's why the master plan says it should be a park. That lot for a curb cut will be in the intersection. That is considered so dangerous that you cannot plat a lot like that anymore. If the Alexa lot, this vacant lot, and the lot next door were one lot, and a developer came in and said, I want to replat these, that lot would not be allowed to be created. It is inside the intersection. That is one of the concerns about having a driveway there or having multifamily there. Is one of the things that happens with the big apartment complex across the street is their moving trucks are so long and their loading area is so short that they block airline quite often with a moving van. Here, if you have a moving truck there, you're blocking that whole intersection. And it's generally dangerous to have a curb cut there anyway. I was the person who put together that sheet for you. That's the poll quotes from the currently existing area development plan. And the reason that's important is it's incredibly rare. I used to have your job. It's incredibly rare for a specific piece of land to be in the area development plan as saying the city of Corpus Christi should pass a bond to buy this land and turn it into a park. That is what the area development plan says. And the importance of the area development plan is that is the legal basis for which the determination of whether a zoning change negatively affects nearby property is made. So all the people whose views are being blocked, the public, the neighbors across the street, I'm not one of them, go to your area development plan. You know, when I was in your guys' shoes, we'd come in and say, what does the area development plan say? What does the future land use map say? And if it said it's going to be multifamily, sorry, single-family household who, you know, doesn't want to live near people who live in apartments, you should have looked when you bought and seen what is this going to be. And if it said it's going to be multifamily, sorry, you should have known. Buyer beware. This says it should be a park. And so I would encourage you to reject this application and suggest to council that they put it on the CIP to buy this. Those of us in the neighborhood are more than happy to work on funding sources. The other issue is that the stormwater drain for the whole area goes out there. If I talked to Dr. Jace Tunnel about this, if the city wants to put a trash interceptor there like it has along the bayfront, it's going to need more land than it has. And developing this lot as a private lot is going to mean that the city's at some point going to have to come back and get a portion of it if it ever wants to put in a trash interceptor. This actual outfall was what set off all of the city's efforts on buying the interceptor. Jace's dad lived at the landmark and took video outside, and there was just trash ejecting out onto it.
And I appreciate your comments, but the 3 minutes is up, so I appreciate it.
Okay.
We have a lot of people willing to speak, so thank you for anything else.
I hope you ask council to do what's actually in your guys' master plan.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak on item 15, please? Oh, well, I was wrong. Sorry. There's nobody willing to speak on this item. We do have some more. I was thinking we'd have an army of people. Yes, sir. Please state your name and address, please, for the record. Thank you very much.
My name is Mo Motaki. I live at 2921 Ocean Drive. I own this property, and I own the property right beside it. I really, as I mentioned before, I don't think we should allow commercial property or duplex or anything like that to be placed on that property because it is set for residential. And that's what I think it should stay as residential. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, sir.
My name is Robert Oshman. I have a couple of residences. My main residence is 326 Bermuda Place, but I recently purchased a house on Ocean Drive, 4728 Ocean Drive. I beg to differ with Mr. Demas. There were 10 lots, 10 properties that were in the 200-foot zone, and I believe you said 7 of them.
If you would address us, please, sir.
And not. So that leaves like about 70% that were opposed to changing this zone, okay? You know, the property is beautiful. Ocean Drive is beautiful. It was planned that the city planned it so that there would be single dwelling, multi-dwelling, and then back to single dwelling. We're screwing it up. What's to prevent me from purchasing the property next to it, keeping my property, leveling it, and say, hey, commercial, let's build another Alexa here. Let's do it. I'll get a lot of money, but is that what is good for the city? People come here in Corpus Christi, what do? They drive down Ocean Drive. It's beautiful. You see the bay. We don't see it when we have all the multi stuff, but that's okay. We have beautiful houses. They see beautiful houses. This is what they do. This is what you and I do. We jog, we walk, we cycle, and we cycle on Ocean Drive. Do we cycle to see apartments? No. We cycle because it's beautiful. The bay is beautiful. Why build more things on the bay that are tall, that are obstructive, and were not in our plans? Like Mr. Loeb said, I looked at that, and it is very true. I read it in detail. From Airline all the way down to Ennis-Jocelyn was designed for parks and for houses, not for dwellings, not for multi-residential areas. We need to think about what we're doing to our city. We need to think about what we're doing to our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Appreciate that.
Good evening. I'm Gene Guernsey, and I reside at 340 Grant Place here in my hometown, Corpus Christi, Texas. For decades, I've driven by the subject property. I've cycled by the subject property. I've precariously walked by the subject property. I'm a real estate broker for 36 years now. I've been very blessed in this business. I sold the lot. I brokered the lot to the right of this property. I brokered the lot a few years ago to the left of this property. I brokered the lot to the left of that to the apartment development that's there now. I brokered a lot of Ocean Drive over my career, and I currently have more than $4 million worth of Ocean Drive listed for sale currently. I've been very blessed this year to have sold more than $40 million of real estate in Corpus Christi, Texas. It's not like a commercial for me, but it's not. It's to prove a point that I know this lot, I know real estate, I know the market. When said property was purchased, it was purchased at a discounted rate because the adjacent lot was zoned apartment tourist district at the time. It's been zoned that for more than 40 years. The precarious ingress and egress of the subject property also brought the value down. As a matter of fact, the subject property was purchased for $105,000 less than the adjoining property and $220,000 less than a similar sized lot at 5900 Ocean Drive, just down the way. All those lots were zoned single-family residential dwellings. It was purchased for less because it already had the stigma of having apartments built next to it. It's unfair to now rezone this property and push that stigma down the block, push that stigma to the other neighbors in the area. The lot has been zoned single-family residential lot for more than 40 years. It's not time to change it today. It's been that way. I can understand that the lot owner's concerned about depreciating value because the Nueces County Appraisal District showed the value at $100,000 less than purchase price. But that's actually a good thing because the taxes are lower for the constituent. As it is zoned today, though, the lot is worth more than what they paid for it. But I'm actually really disappointed that we're all here this evening spending so much time on this subject because, as David said, the city went through an extensive planning process and said that and had a policy statement. It directed staff to acquire and develop combination park and bayfront view vista points, and I quote, at the intersection of Ocean Drive and Airline Road. This was back in 1995, 1998. It should have been done. We heard this long presentation from these great gentlemen who are working hard at making our city a better place, presentation about parks and about trust and about developers, about giving the city money to do things. Good, this was done years ago. I thank you all for what you do and for the time that you spend on subjects like this, and I appreciate your help. I'm urging you to just deny the zoning change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Sorry, we can't open it. One comment apiece. Thank you for your. I can't do that again. Anyone else wishing to speak on item 15? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing on item 15. Andrew, I have a clarification. The applicant mentioned that he had a permit at one point to build a house prior to the apartment complex.
Did submit plans, but no permit was ever issued.
So hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Permit was issued.
Yeah, so
Interesting enough, the driveway for the house is in the same location it would be, so a driveway for a house is safe in an intersection apparently, but not the same width for 5 units.
And my only question for that was when you'd mentioned that the setbacks for the neighboring property there was not a house there, but if a permit has been pulled, was, I guess, the timing of that permit and the setbacks of the development next door, or does the permit not satisfy?
What the UDC states is if a house is constructed, then the increased setback is required for multifamily. A permit wouldn't be enough because at any time a person could choose to cancel. Exactly.
That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you. Any other questions for staff, Commissioner York?
Did have one. Can you just clarify for us or confirm when was the property? So it was stated that this property, when it was purchased, the land adjacent to it was already multifamily. Can you tell us when was that property rezoned to multifamily?
It was never rezoned. It is the original zoning for the adjacent tract. Zoning was adopted in the city of Corpus Christi in 1947.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff before we consider a motion? No? Anybody? All right, do I have a motion for this item?
I'll make a motion that we deny staff's recommendation to change the zoning and leave the zoning as is.
I have
Second.
a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all. And Doctor, we are recommending to the council, so the city council will have the final say, obviously. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you all for your comments tonight. All right, moving on, Andrew, to item 16, please.
Okay, so moving on to our final zoning case / main event. It is item 16, which is the Dock 5, also known as Quick Quack Car Wash, located at 3302 South Alameda Street. The request was originally from the ON District to the CN1 Neighborhood Commercial District. Since the last Planning Commission meeting, in discussions with the applicant and hearing quite a bit of feedback from the neighborhood, staff has developed a special permit, and the applicant has agreed to the terms of the special permit and formally amended their application from ON to ON with a special permit. The property is located at the corner of...
Sorry, did you say ON?
ON, Neighborhood Office.
The original, you said amended from ON? I thought it was CG.
So it was, CN1 was the original request.
Request,
Because of the
Originally, it was ON already, and it was going ON to
CN1.
CN1, and now it's
Now,
amended ON.
because of the tabling and discussion of special permit, the applicant went ahead and said, I'm going to amend my application, endorse the special permit, so I'm no
So
longer
the
considering.
base zoning would stay the same, there's just a special permit?
Correct,
Okay,
exactly.
Thank you.
So again, the property is located at the corner of Alameda Street and Texan Trail, an intersection of both an arterial and collector street. Here's an aerial view of the subject property. As far as zoning pattern is concerned, you have a collection of ON districts located on the same side of South Alameda that have been transitioning over the years. You have general commercial across the street, both original zoning as part of the development, and then you have, of course, Driscoll Children's Hospital and Doctors Regional that obtained both general commercial zoning and CN1 neighborhood commercial zoning. As far as existing land use is concerned, it is currently a professional office. Those buildings will, of course, be demolished to make room for the car wash. The future land use, however, is commercial, which is a much higher intensity than professional office. All utilities are available to the subject property. And as far as 13 notifications were sent out to properties within the 200-foot boundary, 4 were outside. Within the boundary, we received 2 opposition letters, which constitutes 4%. And we did receive several that I'm sure you have seen. It's both in your packet and those that I'm sure the neighborhood's been in contact with you that are located outside of the 200-foot boundary, both for and against. Here's a rough site plan to show how the car wash would be oriented. The exit of the tunnel would be facing the adjacent medical office located to the south and east, and the entrance would be located directed towards the My Favorite Muffin on the other side of Texan Trail. You're queuing and stacking, so if one was to enter the property, they would enter off of Alameda, curve and enter, stacking located here, and then make their way to the booth that is managed by an employee here, and then, of course, enter the wash and back out, whether turning left or right onto South Alameda. The purpose of this second driveway on Texan Trail in discussions with the applicant is to provide an emergency exit, or if someone were to wait in queue and change their mind, they could exit through this direction. Additionally, if somebody wanted to enter through here, of course, they would be cutting line, so to speak, so they would be outside of the queue. They would have to loop around and try again. Or if they were only...
Excuse me, can you say the street that you're talking about so I can follow along? We're on the topic. I just need to know the street name.
Sure, we have a
Cutting through. Thank you.
Texan Trail and South Alameda, the only 2 streets we're discussing. So if someone were to enter off of Texan Trail, They could curve through the property and only access the vacuums. They would not be able to get in line for the queue for the car wash unless there were, of course, no cars in queue on these long queuing lines, which I believe at the last meeting was somewhere in the 45 to 50 number of cars that could stack in those lanes.
Andrew, can you go back to that
Sure.
last slide?
Can we finish the presentation and then verify questions, please, Mr. Stewart? Mr. Stewart.
Hold that thought.
Hold that thought. Thank you, Andrew.
So moving on to staff recommendation, we are recommending approval of the special permit, and I'll go through the conditions. The only use allowed other than what is allowed in the ON district. So the ON has a litany of different medical offices, urgent care clinics, you name it, it's pretty much allowed in ON, including multifamily at 47 units per acre. The only use outside of what's allowed by right would be the automated tunnel car wash. A buffer yard will be required of 10 feet in width with a 7-foot masonry wall along the entire property line shared with St. Patrick's School and church, their athletic fields and Boy Scout cabin, that entire property line. So going back one slide, that is this entire line. Would have to have 10 foot of buffer and a 7-foot masonry wall. The hours of operation would be limited from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. The dumpsters, any dumpsters located on site would need to be screened. Any lighting installed on site must be shielded and downcast, meaning the cone of light cannot leave the property. If it does, that is a code violation. Number 6 is noise. The municipal code today states once you achieve a certain decibel reading, from the point of a complaint, let's say it's filed that a noise is exceeding that decibel reading, that would be a zoning violation, which is set at roughly 65 decibels. So that they have to follow that same noise ordinance that's set for all noise generating uses, no matter what type of noise generating uses, but nevertheless, it applies across the board. The last two options, or conditions I should say, is first is that all other requirements of the UDC building codes and fire codes are applicable. This is special permits are never a get out of jail free card. Just because you're granted one specific use doesn't mean you don't have to follow every other requirement of the codes. And then lastly is our standard time limit, which means if a special permit is granted and a building permit is not issued or a building application is not submitted within 24 months, that special permit expires.
Thank you.
Yes, and then lastly, in speaking with the applicant, they have requested to table the item to the first meeting in January, which I believe is January 11th.
Any particular reason?
They would still like to reach out to the neighborhood. I've passed along every notice that I've received, I've passed to the applicant. I know they're formulating a presentation. They're going to reach out to either do some form of town hall or some means of meeting with the neighborhood to hear any concerns that they may have before they decide whether or not they want to move forward with the rezoning. But that is why they're asking for the tabling.
Thank you for that. All right. Commissioner, you finished with the presentation?
Yes, sir. That's the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't bring my pen today, so I didn't want to forget my question. Can you just go back to that slide that showed where you were doing all the movements?
Sure.
So the exit, I guess, where the vacuums are, which is usually the biggest concern here, is on the bottom of the page?
Correct. You would exit.
What's that building next door? That's not the school?
This is an ear, nose, and throat clinic, or a doctor's
okay.
physician's
Know where we're
office.
at. Okay. And they were, on the opposition map, they were not opposed to this?
They did not return a notice.
Okay.
I do not believe so. I think it's a separate property owner that owns these two existing medical offices. But either way, they did not respond.
Thank you. Commissioner York, any other thoughts or questions? Commissioner Schrader?
Mr. Demas, has the other, this applicant has other facilities in town, and in particular, the noise question. Have there been any questions raised on those locations meeting the noise ordinance?
No, and in fact, Quick Quack is one of the few car washes of all of their facilities I have not received a noise complaint. There are a few in town that are adjacent, next door to single-family homes, and believe me, I was receiving phone calls. Those had general commercial zoning. They were next to a Stripes. There's an infamous one on Cimarron that is loud, and we had to go back and ask the builder to install a little bit hardy of a fence. It was a 6-foot wooden fence because it was just outside the buffer requirements. So they went back, they installed a hardier fence to try to provide some source of noise attenuation. They were able to adjust the volume of their blowers by not having them at set all the way to 11, but at a reasonable setting. So yes, there are complaints that we do receive, but I'm happy to say none of them have been a quick quack facility.
Okay, and then, so if you were to receive one, I mean, obviously the masonry fence is going to knock that down. Whatever it is going to, because the ones I've seen, they don't have masonry fences on them that I'm aware of. So that component should be knocked down. But if you were to receive a notice on it, you actually go out and measure that, or code enforcement does, goes out and measures that, correct?
That is correct. So the way the municipal code is worded is, if, let's say, for instance, instead of a doctor's office, I live next door, and I complain that the sound of the blowers or vacuums were too loud. It is from the point of complaint, meaning if I said, I cannot sleep at night because it's too loud, a code enforcement officer would come into my home with a decibel meter and measure how loud is the sound from inside of my home. It wouldn't be from the edge of the property line unless I complain I can't sit in my backyard without enjoying because it's too loud. Then the measurement would be taken from that point. But that is verbatim what the municipal code says, is it is from the point of complaint.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so so the person making the complaint determines.
They have to articulate exactly
where that unacceptableness is.
Where it's offensive, correct.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner York.
Just a procedural question, I guess, but we just found out that they're tabling this again, and many of these people
We'll
were
still
here
open the
last
public
time,
hearing,
right?
and we don't have to take that recommendation.
How does that?
Yes, we would
Is
still.
there a way to notify people? I just feel bad that everybody showed up here for a second time. Now they're going to have to show up again. For a
And it
third
was
time.
in discussions, so the public hearing would still proceed. We would still collect public comment. All of these comments, regardless of the decision of Planning Commission, would still go to City Council. No matter what, it is renoticed again. The sign will be updated on site for when the council hearing is set. We would set a new sign for the January 11th date. We've made every chance to, or every opportunity to email the notices that we received via email that the meeting had not only been delayed tonight, but that there could be a potential tabling. So we've been trying to take every effort so no one feels that, their opinion doesn't matter, because the first thing that matters, in our democracy is that every voice is heard and every vote counts. So absolutely, every notice that's been sent, every email that's been sent is becoming part of our zoning report and will be in City Council's hands.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dibble.
And just to further that question, so for the folks that are here tonight, if they wanted to speak this evening, they've got that opportunity.
Absolutely.
But likewise, whenever this, in January or whenever it gets next scheduled in Planning Commission, I mean, they could speak tonight and they could speak at the meeting
Absolutely.
in January, or they could not speak tonight, but they're still gonna get
Another
heard.
opportunity, and then there's always 2 hearings at council. So this is not the last chance to say your piece.
Okay.
Andrew, I just have one quick question on the hours of operation. Normally I see it 7 to 7. Is it 7 to 9 for a request from the applicant, or is that?
Yes, in their business model during the summer months of June, July, and August, I know our summer meteorologically is a lot longer than 3 months, but their business model is June, July, and August, it goes till 9. The rest of the year, it's 7 to 7.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions for staff before we open the public hearing portion? Yes, sir.
Andrew, when Commissioner Sheldon was talking about the noise decibel, so when somebody makes a complaint and, code enforcement gets involved, I don't know if you answered it or if I missed it, but do you actually, do they have to meet that requirement within their property line? Or can somebody be, just say outside in the playground, in the park, and it's too loud? And
Sure.
So if code enforcement were to go over there, they would measure from where they were offended by the noise?
Correct. So if this, let's say when I was a Boy Scout, that was my troop 3 next door. If I was in a scout meeting and I said, look, we can't have a meeting, it's just too loud, you could make a complaint from that very spot. Code enforcement would come out and take a reading with their decibel meter.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be within, you could be 10 houses down and say, it's too loud, I can hear it, please come and take a reading.
And if it's within the decibel limits, then it's
Then
not
it's allowed.
enforceable, right? It's
Correct.
allowed. Okay.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right, at this time, we will open the public hearing regarding item 16. I do not see the applicant. Is the applicant in the house?
No, he's
Seeing none.
available by phone if I need to phone him in, but he's not in person.
No problem. Thank you. Seeing none, anybody wishes to speak?
You break the ice.
All right, if anybody would listen to speak, please state your name and address for the record.
Okay. Hi, my name is Caroline White. I live at 325 Camellia Drive in historic Morningside. I moved to historic Morningside. Oh, before I get started, I gave everyone a pamphlet, and this kind of just gives you an idea of what our neighborhood is, what it looks like, and the reason that I actually chose to purchase a home in Morningside at 24 years old and now 27. With that said, I included the article that sold me right away. When I read this, I said, oh my gosh, I want to live there. I'm going to find a house there. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Please read it at your convenience. The next that I included is the Historic Morningside Preservation Society Constitution, and that is just kind of laying out that, that we are not legal yet, but we could get there. But basically an organization that we have leadership, and I happen to be the street rep for Camellia, so I am representing everyone on Camellia and we are all opposed to the car wash. So speaking for Camellia, we do not want the car wash. And also provided is our boundaries for historic Morningside. I do believe I heard in a presentation that the developer wanted to use Glazebrook as a cut-through, but obviously that would not work. And why I interrupted the gentleman, because he wasn't very specific with the street names and how to, this is a residential area. So you can obviously see our boundaries, and then the next, I wish I could have done this a little bit larger, but this is just after one rain event. Believe it or not, one rain event will completely make a lake in Morningside, and that's the entire neighborhood, not just Camellia. Over here where you see this fire hydrant is the actual Texan Trail where they want to develop the car wash. And then right here, this is a clogged storm basin. I'm learning the verbiage, so that's also on Texan. So I walked with the city crews and I told them that these are the issues. I've also reported those issues to the city manager and my District 2 representative, to which nothing has been done. So on September 2nd, I dug this out and tried to sweep the remaining water that was on, because obviously West Nile. I tried to sweep it to the nearest catch basin, but was not successful. So then I called the city and I asked them, to help me walk through it. I have the notes here. There's no curb, sidewalks, and then I guess lastly on your last page is if we didn't have standing water, we would not have West Nile. So basically the infrastructure here along with the noise ordinance, and then let me just add on that if you can't hear a school bell ring over a vacuum, I think that student safety is more important. So on behalf of Camellia and Morningside, they're a quick quack, we're not welcome. So that's all.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
My name is Mike Schutz. I live at 3234 Topeka. I believe this is the second time we've been here. I appreciate you all. Let's come back and see if we can't beat the buzzer. Did any of you, if I'm allowed to ask questions to you, receive SDS sheets from Quick Quack?
So we will listen, but we will not respond. Unfortunately, we cannot go back and forth.
We've asked and we couldn't get them. They said they'd supply them, but they did not. Now, they bill themselves as a high pH, low pH car wash. And the industry standard for that is sodium hydroxide on the front end, and then hydrofluoric acid somewhere in the middle, and then they have a whole host of other things that they like to go through. So the problem is, and of course, sodium hydroxide, you remember lye, Red Devil lye, Drano, you're familiar with it. You can buy it anywhere, and of course, you can flush it down the drain if you want to. Gets on your skin, it goes through a process called saponification. It takes the fat in your skin, the oils in your skin, and reduces them to glycerins. And that's why it feels so slippery when you actually come in contact with it. That's on the front end. So, we live right there with it. We'll be in line with it. It'll be a wind tunnel for us. It goes on through, and you get to the industry standard of hydrofluoric acid, which is an absolute nightmare. Now, I sent Andrew, I believe, I can't recognize his presence, I don't guess, or talk to him, but he has a PowerPoint presentation that has just the facts. We just try to plug the facts into it. Hydrofluoric acid is billed as, and I quote by the people in the car wash industry, as a insidious toxic at low concentrations used in vehicle washing. It's not just the burns you can get from it. It's when, if you remember your chemistry as a kid or in college or whatever, when you put a strong acid and a strong base together and you do your stoichiometry and a gas escapes, that gas is hydrogen fluoride. And it's going to go right into our neighborhoods. And you're going to wake up one day and you'll see some giant law firm suing Quick Quack like they sue Monsanto and everything else. It'll take a while. But in the meantime, we've got kids in this neighborhood. We've got little kids who will probably be teenagers or in their 20s by the time we get to that point. If you, who are in charge of deciding who will be our neighbors, if you put this there. If you change the zoning or bend over backwards to help somebody who's not a voter in this place and not a taxpayer yet, or maybe they are somewhere else or something else, but if you bend over backwards to help them, you could very well be putting our kids in jeopardy. Little kids. Putting a 7-foot masonry wall across one side of it, do you think that's going to stop the wind? It will blow over the top of it, and it will make it even worse on that playground next door and down the street in our neighborhood, and it's not going to stop hydrogen. Once it reaches aerosol or any sort of particulate and it gets in the wind tunnel blowing through it, if it's natural 30-mile-an-hour winds carrying it in there, it is going to lose moisture and become more concentrated and more insidious in their own words. It's not a good idea. And it's little kids you're talking about.
Sure. Thank you for your comments, sir.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you for letting us come in.
Yes, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Just your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Mike Flores, 7930 Vishal on the south side. Although I am not a resident of this area, I'm just here to give my perspective of how this might impact the neighboring scout hut. I'm an adult leader. My son is a scout for Troop 162. And right now we enjoy the fact that we have an agreement with this parking lot that's, we're just north of this subject property. So right now we enjoy the fact that we can use the parking every Tuesday evening. We can use the parking when we load and unload for camping trips. And we can use the property for fundraisers, like car washes. So, yeah. So that's one of the things we could use, of course, as far as fundraising goes. But that's going to be, the immediate impact would mean that we might have to park many vehicles on Texan Trail. And so how is that going to impact the business? Unloading equipment and loading equipment, how is that going to take place? We're going to have to look for some type of plan in the future, whether it's with or without whatever business might be there. So it might involve a parking lot on the north part of where the scout hut actually is. But I just wanted to give my perspective, if this proposal were to go through, how it would affect the Boy Scout troop, and we've been there over 50 years. So we have a good membership, we have a strong troop, but it will impact us directly if this is built. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Your name and address, please.
My name is John Baron, and I live at 3267 Topeka Street, which is my driveway 60 feet away from the exit path on Texan Trail. So I'm going to concentrate on reasons why not to change it to ONSP, and the reason is I just don't think that I think that will open up a cascading effect for other properties on the east side of Alameda in the 3200 block, which is just north of this proposed location. That right now is office buildings, and we have a residence in there. Of course, my favorite muffin, Radiology and Associates, is on the other end, but there's people that live on the west side of Topeka Street that their backyard comes right up against that. So if we let this ONSP permit through, then I think that'll cause a cascading effect on the rest of the block, which would be to the detriment of those neighbors in Topeka's that have backyards common to that. I also think that the ONSP, it's going to be detrimental to the public health and safety or general welfare of the citizens of our neighborhood for the reasons mentioned by Mike, because of the chemical nature of the car wash, but also because of the increased traffic patterns that are going to inevitably occur. All the traffic dumping out onto Alameda. There's certain periods of the day where the traffic really increases there. We already have a 20-mile-per-hour zone for the hospital district, and so I think that could be a problem for pedestrians and for traffic and for our neighbors. I would like to also mention why I think that we should keep it ON Neighborhood Office District. And like the Scout Hut, it's been that way probably as long as the Scout Hut, 50 years plus. It served the neighborhood and the community and the medical community well to be as an, for office, neighborhood office district. And it's also, it allows for a peacefulness in our neighborhood that is really special. And as a homeowner, it's just enjoyable to get out there and during periods of non-peak traffic to just have, a peaceful, pleasant evening. We live we're in the halo flight traffic helicopter path. So we're used to that noise. It comes across at 150 feet. And so I think that the historical nature of our neighborhood deserves to have a corner that keeps peacefulness for our neighborhood and safety. I would like to just, and I'll be quickly ending here, that there was a vote last on October 27th when we were to deny the change from ON to CN1, and it wasn't long thereafter that the application for the ONSP came out. And so I think that it was kind of hard to wrap our head around that while we're here today, because it had already been, this commission had voted to deny the zoning change. But they've changed the game a little bit on us, and so we're dedicated to try to keep this from happening as a neighborhood group.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Hello, my name is Glenn Chiller. I live at 3202 Topeka Street, and I'm here to present to you a petition that I organized. Very briefly, the petition says, a car wash business is seeking to rezone property at or near 3302 South Alameda Street from the ON Neighborhood Office District to, and this is an old petition, to the CN1 Neighborhood District, but the point is to install a large car wash operation besides St. Patrick. Rezoning and installing a large car wash in this area would dramatically increase traffic, noise, water pollution. It would not primarily benefit nearby residents as required by CN1 Corpus zoning laws. I assume that applies to the special permit as well, should benefit nearby residents. Let's keep our neighborhood free of additional traffic, noise, and pollution. Let's help keep children and pedestrians safe in our neighborhood. Right now, we have almost 300 people that have signed this petition, and thank you. And I ask you to consider is plopping a car wash operation across from a hospital, beside another hospital, catty corner from a helipad, beside a children's school, and then down the road from a couple other schools. It's just a bad idea. Nothing against car washes, nothing against Quick Whack, but that particular location is particularly bad for a car wash. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Raul Renteria. I live at 3212 Topeka. And I wasn't really going to say much today. I was going to hold off till next time, but I just wanted to piggyback off the last gentleman. He is correct. All the adjacent operations that's going on there, at one point, obviously there is a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit from like 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And they put that there, not arbitrarily. They put it there for a reason. They put it there to protect or to make the area more safe for all the clientele that is around there. Anything from pediatrics to there's people have their primary care doctors. So there's pediatric ages, there's elderly ages, there's sick, there's people who are not very capable of even moving around, things like that. So I think if we put something there that is going to, if we allow something that's going to add more traffic, I think that'll just undermine the safety precautions that was put there at one point that still exists. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Mine's going to be quick. Samuel Gutierrez, 3233 Topeka Street. We are here to benefit the community. We are here to help benefit the community. I oppose this car wash. I washed my car across the street at the HEB car wash. It's right there. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
Allison Schutz, live at 3234 Topeka Street. I'd just like to ask you personally, the commissioners, how would you like to live across the street from a car wash? Because that's what you will be doing if you pass this special permit to two of these families that were here tonight. Really think about that, living right across the street from a car wash. I'm saddened to hear that this is being tabled because I feel like the applicant had since October to talk to the neighborhood. So I mean, it'd be nice to get this resolved, but we can wait till January. As you know, we're concerned about the already busy intersection where kids walk, ride their bikes, and use the bus right in front of the proposed car wash, with 3 schools within walking distance. And the ambulance, I don't think, needs any hindrance in getting to the hospital. Many people ride their bikes and walk in our neighborhood, and traffic is already busy. And I can just have this picture in my mind of St. Patrick's Church with vacuums being heard in the distance. I appreciate what Carolyn brought tonight about the water on Texan Trail, the drainage problems. And it is a worry that the car wash is going to share the wastewater and stormwater line. That's something to take into consideration. I know they're going to recycle, they said, but not all the water, of course. And there's just the aesthetics of how out of place it will look next to a church, a school, hospital, and historic neighborhood. The Barron family that spoke just recently, they've owned their property for 30 years, knowing the zoning across the street. And they and our historic neighborhood should be given as much consideration as the applicant who just bought land for a car wash that wasn't zoned for one. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else? Okay. At this time, I will close the public hearing portion. Commissioner York?
Thank you. I want to see if we could ask Andrew to clarify one of the
Sure.
What was
speakers
it?
was talking about a motion. Can you just clarify what, last time I think we just tabled, we didn't have a motion to deny.
There was an
anything.
original motion, and then there was a motion for reconsideration. The second motion was to table.
Okay, thank you. And then I just wanted to make a comment for the record, since it looks like this may get tabled and the applicant's not here, but I'm assuming they'll get these notes or something, but.
Yes, I've been taking notes of the comments in addition to what was
One
submitted.
of the big concerns was about all the chemicals being used, and
That's a
I'm
good
sure
point.
them being a big company, they probably have something to present on that. I'm sure it's not the first time that's come up, but I would love to see that. So hopefully they have some information to present between now and when this comes back to the residents, but especially to us when they present.
I can actually cover that. I did have a pretty lengthy conversation with the applicant about it. So the truth is, absolutely, sodium hydroxide is used. There's no disputing that. I was able to pull up a safety data sheet. It lists sulfuric acids. It lists all types of alkalines, and they are all listed as dangerous chemicals. And I thought, well, who would use such a product so close to these residential areas? So I went to the top of the page of what product this is that they use, and it's Dawn Ultra Dishwashing Liquid. So Dawn Ultra Dishwashing Liquid, which is used for their car wash, is apparently dangerous in this facility, but all of us use it almost on a daily basis to wash our dishes and our hands. How dangerous is Dawn?
And that's okay. Hold on. Hold on. And I understand the comments. We can't have the outburst, please. I understand. Thank you.
Same concentrations. I went at length with Quick Quack, and I said, I want to be sure before I bring this out to the public that, yes, it's Dawn. He says, yes, it's the same stuff you buy over the counter. It's, of course, we're buying it in commercial capacity, but it is not more concentrated. It is no different chemical composition. It is Dawn dishwashing detergent because it is a degreaser. That's the reason. And obviously, you don't want to use anything that's going to eat away at clear coats or paints. I can tell you at the HEB car wash, because I live in the neighborhood, my windshield was chipped by it, so it's not exactly the safest wash. But the point is, it's not dangerous chemicals being used. So that was something I was very keen on when it was brought up the first time, because I wanted to rest assure everyone that we as a city are not going to promote a use that uses obviously hazardous materials that would put lives in danger.
Nor would I imagine EPA or anybody else would allow
Correct.
something like that either. I mean,
So
I do appreciate the gentleman's comments. They were very detailed and very more than I probably understand what all those chemicals are. But I definitely don't see. I could be wrong. I just don't know how the EPA or somebody would allow that either. So, but I do understand and appreciate both sides of those conversations and comments. Sheldon Schrader, Commissioner Schrader, sorry.
Thank you, Andrew.
No problem.
I think it's important on these where there is a lot of personal angst as residents, as several residents have brought up. It's brought up time and again in these meetings that you're concerned about your homes, you're concerned about children. We are reminded constantly about how much apparently all of these decisions that we make, how much they potentially will affect children. We are wearing apparently an enormously heavy load because we have so many decisions to make that will extremely detriment children. You have to place this in the context of what our purview is here. We're not chemists, we're not scientists, we're not any of those things. You have to take these things to the right place. It's not fair to bring every single concern to bearing on one decision. This is a decision about, is this appropriate zoning? So I'm not saying none of these things aren't concerns. They're absolute concerns. If you've got a concern about it, it's a concern. But this is not the place to try to decide every one of them whether or not it's the decision to make this a zoning case. So if you're concerned about health concerns, you take those to the health department. If you're concerned about other issues about how this facility is built, or any facility, anything that potentially is put on this property, you can bring that into, file a case for permitting. So you do have to do due diligence about how you pursue any of these questions, and that's on anybody that brings a case here. But I think when it's concerned about residential properties and people are concerned about where they reside and how something may or may not affect them, we get a lot of angst about that. Any one of us would be that way. But you do have to remember the context of the forum that this is and what we have the purview to regulate or not. So I just remind you to consider that.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions for staff? Just to clarify, we've done this in the past as well. There's a recommendation for a table. It's our decision to recommend however we would like to recommend. The previous recommendation was to recommend it as tabled, and we didn't do that. So we don't have to take any of the tabling. We don't have to take any of the motions. We can approve, deny, table, approve to council to table. There's all kinds of things we can do there. So just keep that in mind, that range of motions when you're making one.
I just have a question for
Please,
Andrew.
Commissioner Zarguni.
Yes, sir.
When did the applicant request the tabling? Today?
It was about a day and a half ago.
Okay. I just want to know when the
But it was well after we had published the agenda and the packet to the Legistar site.
Thank you. Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Yes, and he has to table it for the reason that he wants to try to make an effort and talk to all the residential area, express what he's wanting to do and work with them.
Yes, so the discussion I had with him, to be frank, as transparent as possible, was we only had a few email addresses on the original notices that were sent in. Mr. Barone was kind of the main contact, so I sent a few emails. I passed his information to the applicant. I've yet to receive a response because I did distribute the draft special permit to try to get a feel for what the neighborhood might have feelings about or consideration well before it was even rescheduled to come back to Planning Commission, because as it was mentioned, it's been since October. So during the November month, within the very next week, we drafted the special permit, we emailed it out to the email addresses we had, and received no response. So now that more email addresses and notices have come in, I am passing those. The same day I receive it is the same day I'm sending it to the applicant. And he's building a database to then reach out to this entire list to have some form of either in-person or virtual meeting to address the concerns.
Well, that's good. I mean, at least he's making an effort to try to explain himself instead of just trying to say, this is what I want, and not even give anybody a chance to give their input, so.
And I agree that it's a good effort, but I do think there's still a car wash is the problem at the end of the day. The neighborhood's still against the car wash. I don't know what
Absolutely.
you can do to modify it for a car wash, and that's part of. We have tabled items twice. I don't think we've ever tabled more than twice, and I think we've only done that once that I'm aware of. And I could be wrong, but 7 years later, I don't think we've done that very often. Commissioner Zarguni.
I guess my question for the applicant, and I wish he was here tonight, is what exactly he's trying to discuss with the residents in terms of the concerns and all that. Like I understood that he said he wants to have a meeting and explain it, but to Chairman Ball, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be a car wash. Is it something different that we're not?
So are there
I just wanted to make sure.
SP conditions we didn't consider? Is there something else the neighborhood might want installed, a different type of lighting, different type of hours, different something, but we can only plan for I use the conditions that I've used in past car washes. Before they were allowed by right in CN1, I created a kind of a bank of what are the common special permit conditions. I took those conditions and made that part of the UDC. So when a car wash comes in a CN1 district, it automatically applies those old special permit conditions. So, of course, we can't track every single one that could possibly be considered. So the idea would be now seeing all of these notices that have been returned, what are the exact concerns? That would give the applicant an opportunity to craft additional conditions. They have not said no to any condition that's been thought of, but if we need to take it a step further, restrict even more, I'm sure the applicant would consider those.
Sure.
And if not, then the zoning's denied. I mean,
understand.
that's
My
just to give them a
only
chance.
thing is that timing of it. This was a month ago, right? When we had this meeting?
Well, we only had one meeting after that meeting. We had one meeting in November, and then there was Thanksgiving. So it's been 2 meetings, which is essentially a month.
And
but
just a
it
day
hasn't been
before
long
to
enough.
table it. I don't know. Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody wishing to make further comment or make a motion?
I just want to make a comment.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
I really don't think tabling is even a solution for these residents. I think they've made up their mind. I don't really think there's anything that Quick Quack can do that is where they're going to probably be in agreement. And kind of like what Jeremy was saying, you know, tabling it again till January 11th, having them call, you know, just a comment, you know, again, just listening to them. I mean, I personally heard the gentleman the first time he came, and he seemed very reasonable, wanting to work, you know, with the neighborhood. And I know there was, you know, some kind of heated discussions going on, and, you know, he looked a little bit surprised and stuff. So I don't think tabling and him communicating another plan or trying to compromise with him is going to help.
Any other comments for the good of the commission? Commissioner York?
Sorry, just a question. In case we decide to make a recommendation one way or the other and not table and let this go to council, you know, I'm kind of torn because I can see, you know, if I lived there, I would have the same concerns, but I see the future land use, you know, is a heavier commercial than what it is now. I don't really agree with that, knowing this area. I think the neighborhood office thing is more appropriate, but my question is, Andrew, can you kind of go through what staff's thinking process was in evaluating this and how you came to recommend approval of this?
Sure. So CG2 is actually the ultimate commercial district, the most versatile that could be applied, and it would match future land use. It is a major intersection, which means there would not be any issues with access to traffic or access to wide enough right-of-ways. The CN1 district we do use in a transitional area as a go-between between your residential areas and your commercial areas. That's why you have many medical offices zoned CN1. You have many medical offices zoned ON. The thing about the ON district is today somebody could open an urgent care clinic with 24-hour ambulance service. Today somebody could open a methadone clinic. Today somebody could open indigent care for homeless without question with today's zoning. So a car wash, when you look at the wide spectrum of uses that could be applied on site, is quite a less intense when you look at the whole list of uses that could be on there. A special permit will specifically narrow that to one use. So none of those other uses can be placed, but of the whole host of CN1 uses, the only one pulled in a special permit would be a car wash.
Okay. And I don't know if you can answer this, but what is different about a car wash that causes it to be excluded from the current zoning, the ON?
The ON district is because that ON district is typically just professional office. It stands for office neighborhood. And so your medical offices, your apartment complexes, again, you could have 47 units per acre. So the last zoning case where we were just hung up on 10, this can have a maximum density of 47 units per acre today. So using that, taking into account, you have a major intersection, which if somebody came in and said, I want to build apartments, it's hard to argue, well, you're also at a major intersection. If you want to open Section 8 housing, you can do that right now. There is very few restrictions when it comes to that ON district. But so to apply just one use out of the CN1 district is, and at least in my opinion as a planner, not an unreasonable request. I'm not asking for the 40 uses out of CN1 now. I'm asking for one. Well, I digress from using I'm very careful not to use the word worse, because worse is subjective. What I find worse and what another person finds worse can be two different things. I could be offended by hospitals, and I don't want a hospital opening next door to me. But if we're looking on the pure basis of lights and sound and obnoxious uses, I would think an urgent care clinic or indigent care would be far more obnoxious and more of a safety issue to a school than a car wash would be.
Any other questions for staff? I can't open it back up, sorry, sir. Afterward, we can talk outside, but that's... Anybody else wishing to speak for this item from the commission?
But just my one last word is,
Please.
all the applicant's asking for by tabling is just an opportunity to have a discussion. This panel can make this exact same, if you choose to recommend denial or approval at the next meeting, that's still within their purview. On the part of the applicant, all they're asking for is an opportunity.
Yes, sir.
You did make me think of one last question. Did the applicant tell you why they needed more time? I mean, why they weren't able
Again, so we had 2 email addresses that we received.
It was the contact
and
issue?
I reached out with the draft special permit. I know the applicant did, and we didn't receive a response. As we're receiving these notices from the neighborhood, I've been forwarding them to the applicant and telling him, look, you need to reach out to these folks. Here are their phone numbers, here are their email addresses, they are sending notices, they have legitimate concerns. I would highly recommend having this discussion because this is going to directly impact not only a decision at Planning Commission, but a decision at Council. And he said, great, can I have more time, because I'm going to fly in from Utah to have this discussion, and I want to make sure that if I can do it in person and measuring with the holiday, that I can make time to do so.
And I think, to that point, the special permit, I think, was maybe, I'm not speaking for the applicant, but when he started seeing the kickback. So he thought he changed it enough to get it passed through. And then when he saw additional kickback, he thought, well, I need to try something more. So again, I don't think this.
If it wasn't for Thanksgiving, we probably would have had this discussion
already.
sooner.
Correct. So.
Well, all right, I know we're in discussion time now, so I'll just share my 2 cents that, like I said earlier, I am kind of torn, but the thing that stands out to me doesn't even really have to do with the case, more how it was presented. Because I do this for a living, and I come, you make the case for your client, you meet with the public, and you fight for a zoning case. And so it does bother me that we got all the way to the point of actually being in the middle of a motion to deny, and then the applicant spoke up, didn't speak it. I didn't even know he was here before that, and then didn't even show up today to, defend his case. So that bothers me, because I get the guy is in Utah, and that's fine, but you could have submitted a statement, you could be on the phone, whatever, but didn't even show up. So
I think
He is available by phone. I'll take blame for that.
Right.
That was my fault,
But I
because
get
when he
being
requested the
available and
tabling.
making an effort to be here are different, and they're a big company, they could have been here. I mean, we see Murph here every day for zonings plats that are on consent agenda, but he still comes, because you never know. And so that speaks to me, because if it was really that important, you'd be here. So, again, just sharing my 2 cents, but.
Well, we can further conversation, or we can consider a motion.
I just want to echo on Commissioner your point. I think sense of urgency and making sure showing up and create the, defend on your case and not last minute things is just kind of bothered me also. But that's just, I agree with you.
Did I hear a motion in that?
I don't know if this will hold, but I'm actually going to make a motion that we recommend denial.
All right, I have a motion for denial. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Okay. Motion to deny. If you're opposed, say no.
Right, can you clarify what being opposed means?
Yes means denial.
A yes means
Okay.
denial. Oppose means that you're opposing your motion, but yes. So.
Okay. Chairman Bob.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Dibble.
Oppose.
Commissioner Schrader.
Opposed.
Commissioner Zarguni.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller is absent. Commissioner York.
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Opposed.
Commissioner Mandel? Sheila?
He had an emergency.
Okay, absent. And Commissioner Salazar Garza?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Again, it's a recommendation to City Council. They will have 2 hearings of that. It will be posted. I would recommend that you be there as well. Just FYI. Thank you. All right, Andrew.
Okay, so
I'm going to make a quick motion, Andrew, for item 17, if you don't mind. We are 9 o'clock, and I would like
was
to
hoping you
table
would say that.
to the next Planning Commission
that
meeting,
is
please.
no problem at all. That'll be my early
Unless
Christmas
everybody
gift.
here agrees to stay with us. Oh, they're all gone. Okay. They all left. All right, so thank you for that, Andrew.
So that'll be my early Merry Christmas. We'll move the training to next year.
Thank you very much for that. Director's report, please.
I have a very long director's note.
We're bad.
Extra Merry Christmas.
There's no report for this evening, but we wish all of you a happy holidays, and we thank you for your service to the city of Corpus Christi.
Thank you for that. You too.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, anything else for the good of the commission? If not, we are adjourned.
All right.